The Gaza Strip, a densely populated Palestinian enclave, is in the throes of a profound humanitarian crisis. Israel's recent military operations, launched in response to a Hamas attack, have exacerbated an already dire situation. The offensive has resulted in a staggering loss of life, with thousands of Palestinian civilians, including a disproportionate number of children, killed. Homes, hospitals, and schools have been reduced to rubble, leaving the population grappling with displacement, trauma, and despair. The already precarious humanitarian situation has been further compounded by Israel's tightening of the blockade on Gaza. This has choked off the flow of essential supplies, including food, water, medicine, and fuel, pushing the population to the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, and a shortage of essential medical supplies has hampered their ability to provide adequate care. The combination of widespread destruction, displacement, and the lack of essential services has created a breeding ground for disease and malnutrition. Immediate steps must be taken to lift the blockade, allow for the unimpeded flow of humanitarian aid, and provide urgent medical assistance to the injured and displaced. Israel's recent military actions in Gaza must be understood within the broader context of its long-standing policy of territorial expansion in the West Bank. The planned annexation of the West Bank, a move that has drawn international condemnation, is a clear manifestation of this expansionist agenda. This annexation plan, if implemented, would effectively end any remaining prospect of a two-state solution, the internationally recognized framework for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. On an ideological level, it reflects the belief of some within the Israeli government that the West Bank, which they refer to by its biblical names, Judea and Samaria, is an integral part of the historical land of Israel. Politically, the annexation plan is seen as a way to solidify right-wing support within Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly pledged to annex parts of the West Bank, a move that resonates with his right-wing base. Strategically, the annexation of the West Bank would give Israel greater control over vital water resources and strategic territory. The annexation plan is a dangerous escalation that threatens to ignite a new cycle of violence and instability in the region. The Palestinian Authority, already facing numerous challenges, finds itself further weakened and marginalized by Israel's recent actions. The escalation in Gaza and the looming threat of annexation have dealt a severe blow to the PA's authority and legitimacy, both in the eyes of the Palestinian people and on the international stage. The PA's ability to govern effectively has been severely hampered by Israel's continued control over the West Bank. The expansion of Israeli settlements, the presence of Israeli military checkpoints, and the restrictions on Palestinian movement and economic activity have all undermined the PA's ability to provide basic services and exercise its authority. The planned annexation of the West Bank would further erode the PA's legitimacy and could potentially lead to its collapse. This would leave the PA in a precarious position, caught between its responsibility to govern and its inability to do so effectively. The international community must recognize the dire situation facing the PA and provide it with the necessary political and financial support to survive. Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank have far-reaching implications for Jordan, a country that shares a long and complex border with both Israel and the Palestinian territories. Jordan's stability is linked to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and any escalation could spill over into Jordan. Jordan's large Palestinian population makes it vulnerable to the fallout from the conflict. Any escalation in the West Bank could trigger a new wave of refugees, straining Jordan's resources. The planned annexation of the West Bank poses a direct threat to Jordan's interests. The response of Arab countries to Israel's recent actions has been muted, reflecting a broader shift in the Arab world's stance towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Gone are the days when Arab leaders would rally around the Palestinian cause with fiery rhetoric and threats of military action. Today, the response is characterized by a combination of cautious diplomacy, public condemnation, and in some cases, tacit acceptance of Israel's growing regional dominance. Internally, many Arab states are grappling with their own domestic challenges, including economic stagnation, political instability, and the threat of terrorism. These pressing domestic concerns have taken precedence over the Palestinian issue, which is increasingly seen as a distant problem. Externally, the rise of Iran as a regional power has reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. Arab states that once viewed Israel as their primary adversary now see Iran as a more immediate threat. This shared threat perception has led to a degree of rapprochement between Israel and some Arab states, as evidenced by the recent normalization agreements between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. The international community's response to Israel's actions follows a familiar pattern of condemnation and calls for restraint. However, these pronouncements have done little to deter Israel. The inability to translate rhetoric into action reflects the limits of international influence. The United Nations Security Council has been largely ineffective in addressing the conflict. The United States has repeatedly used its veto power to block resolutions critical of Israel. The international community's failure to hold Israel accountable has created a climate of impunity. The Trump administration's approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been a significant departure from that of its predecessors. President Trump's unwavering support for Israel, coupled with his administration's disdain for multilateralism and international law, has emboldened Israel and undermined the prospects for a negotiated two-state solution. One of the most consequential moves of the Trump administration was its decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to move the U.S. embassy there. This decision, widely condemned by the international community, reversed decades of U.S. policy and inflamed tensions in the region. The Trump administration also cut off funding for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, the main provider of essential services to Palestinian refugees. The Trump administration's approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been widely criticized for its bias towards Israel and its disregard for Palestinian rights. Critics argue that the administration's actions have made a two-state solution virtually impossible and have increased the likelihood of a one-state outcome in which Israel would be forced to choose between being a Jewish state or a democratic state. The Palestinian people find themselves at a critical juncture in their long struggle for self-determination. The two-state solution, the internationally recognized framework for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, appears increasingly untenable in the face of Israel's ongoing settlement expansion and its determination to annex parts of the West Bank. The Palestinian leadership is divided and weakened, with the Palestinian Authority facing a crisis of legitimacy, and Hamas, the Islamist group that controls Gaza, viewed as a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, and the European Union. This internal division has hampered the Palestinians' ability to present a united front and to effectively advocate for their rights on the international stage. Despite the formidable challenges they face, the Palestinian people have not given up hope for a just and lasting peace. Popular resistance to the Israeli occupation continues both in the West Bank and in Gaza. Palestinian civil society organizations are also playing a vital role in documenting human rights abuses, providing essential services, and advocating for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The international community has a moral and legal obligation to support the Palestinian people in their struggle for self-determination. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most protracted and intractable conflicts of our time. Decades of violence and failed peace initiatives have left both sides deeply scarred. The current situation is marked by a humanitarian crisis in Gaza and a political stalemate. A just peace can only be achieved through a negotiated two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, this solution remains the only viable path to ending the conflict. The international community has a critical role in creating the conditions necessary for peace. This includes putting pressure on Israel to halt its settlement expansion and providing support to the Palestinian Authority. The international community must act now to create a future of peace and security for both sides.